Good afternoon, and welcome to a special episode of Investigate Everything. I am your host, Brian O'Shea. I know a lot of you have been waiting for me to get back on the Intern 2.0 series, where I started breaking down what I see as the modern Intern infecting the United States with their infectious and disease-ridden messaging, speaking geopolitically. So we had covered Kim Iverson. We will get back to Max Blumenthal, as well as several others who popped up, Hazal Din of the American Communist Party, and of course Jackson Hinkle, who's overtly a communist. People just refuse to see it for some reason, especially on the right. So with that said, our guest today, he's back. I know you all loved him. It was one of our most watched shows. I have with me today Trevor Loudon. Trevor is an expert in so many things in and around the history of communism and how that same model of communism is invading the United States today. He was way ahead of the curve with his book and movie that came out many years ago called The Enemy Within. And so definitely I'm going to put those links in, so you have to watch them. And I will warn you, when you watch his first movie or you read the book, you have to keep reminding yourself it was years, it was before the pandemic. And you see it happening now. He saw the same thing happening then, except now it's really exploded. So without much further ado, I'm adding Trevor to the stage. I'm so lucky to have him, and thank you, Trevor, for joining me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Brian. It's great to catch up. I love our conversations, and
absolutely,
a big shout out to the audience. Thanks for tuning in.
Absolutely. And are you dealing okay with the snow down there now where you're at?
Look, it's been in Florida. It's been bone chilling 70 degrees here today, and I don't know how I cope with it.
Well, it's a balmy 10 degrees here in Brooklyn, so we're. Yeah. I'm not kidding you. It's so cold.
What have you done in a past life to deserve that, Brian?
I don't know. Maybe maybe this is a weather machine sent by the ghost of Lenin. So we could feel one of those cold Russian winters.
I sometimes wonder when the hurricanes come through. I think, wow, I wonder if they have weather technology to screw us up.
Nothing would surprise me.
Yeah, nothing.
So, Trevor, I wanted to. A friend of mine reached out to me, and I understand you are going to be going on a kind of a mini speaking tour up and around New York. And there you can see on the screen is the flyer, and I am going to put a link so everyone can go and watch Trevor speak about communism in America. But really quickly, how did you... Oh, yeah, and here we go. So The Enemies Within. This will be February 21st, 2026, 9 to 12 p.m. 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the Best Western Gregory Hotel in the Pavilion Room in Brooklyn, New York. And you can scan the barcode that's on your screen, and we'll get to that. So I know Marshall. Marshall is I believe he's a pastor of some sort here in Brooklyn, and a very inspirational guy to talk to. I actually met him at a political fundraising event put on by my wife, Naomi Wolf, on behalf of the Donald J. Trump King County Republican Club. That's a mouthful, but it's a great club run by Jimmy Wagner when he was running his candidate, Athena Clark. I was so surprised when I got this call from Marshall. He had me on a Zoom call, and they were planning an event for you. So what's going on, and how did this man become so wise as to add you to his messaging? Because it's powerful messaging.
Well, I've known Marshall for a while. I met him in Detroit at a pastor's meeting there. I spoke to some church people there. I think what he liked was the fact that I'm knowledgeable on current politics and the history behind it. I think I've got very few illusions about what we're facing in America. But what a lot of political commentators, I think, don't really reference is the spiritual foundations behind this. Mm-hmm. I really believe we are in a spiritual war for the future of this country. This isn't so much Constitution versus communist or Republican versus Democrat. This is God versus the devil we're talking about here. Mm. And so I think what Marshall liked is I combine a very, very realistic assessment of our current political situation, the players involved, the subversion going on, the revolution that we're in, but also try and put a context to it.
Mm-hmm.
The Solzhenitsyn famously said, the great writer Solzhenitsyn said,
Mm-hmm.
somebody asked him, why did Russia go communist? He said, because they forgot God. And I thought that
powerful.
was a very, very powerful statement and a very accurate statement.
And that's interesting. It does seem that one of the first things to go with communism is God and is something bigger than ourselves. And stop me if I'm wrong, but isn't that why churches are bulldozed? And I got news for the wannabe radical Muslims out there. Mosques are bulldozed too, happening as we speak in China. But to me, it seems delusional to think that you think you're bigger than God because if they have to eliminate God, they must believe that there's a higher power out there and they have to stamp him out on earth. Do they actually think that if they get people to not believe in God, God goes away and they're the masters of the universe? Communists?
I think that's how they kid themselves. But, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. When you lose your fear of something bigger than yourself, you get very arrogant, you get very egotistical. And you look at the fall, why did Satan leave heaven? He's at God's right hand. He was in heaven, but he wanted his own kingdom. And as Milton said in Paradise Lost, he'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. And that is the motivation of communists. They're rebellious people. They're evil people. Look at Cain and Abel, the good brother Abel, who was loyal and faithful and hardworking, and the jealous little snake Cain, who his ego couldn't handle that God favored his brother. So he killed him. He murdered him. And we've been fighting that battle ever since. That is the spirit of communism, the spirit of Cain. Jealousy, anger, resentment, greed. That is the Cain spirit that's in all of us. And that's communism, to be jealous of someone who's got more than you because they've ripped you off, resentment. All communists are resentful, jealous people. And I was talking to Tammy Bruce about this, who is a former leftist. I'm sure Naomi would know her.
No, we know her, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you know well. And I said, Tammy, because I hosted her to a visit in New Zealand many years ago. And I said, Tammy, your leftist friends, why were they leftists? She said, every one of them was damaged. Every one of them had been the child of a broken home, or they had a major drug problem, or their home, or their a strange sexuality that they hadn't come to terms with. And the real way in life is if you have something that's wrong with you, you do some soul searching and you fix it. You take responsibility. No. If you're a communist or you're a socialist, you want to make everybody like you.
That's, it totally goes against the spirit of being an American or being an independent person anywhere.
100%, yeah.
I had to learn. So when I was starting my first business after I'd left the military and after leaving about 2.5 decades of military and intelligence community service for the government, I had to do my own thing. And that's very scary because even though I'd left the military, I still had a job that was pretty much guaranteed as long as my clearance was good. And I never really worried about employment. So I never really had to focus on me. But then what happened was when I started a small business, I weirdly had to focus on me. Like, okay, why did that fail? And when I looked for external reasons, I couldn't find them. Then I was forced to say, okay, what did I do wrong? And it kind of forces you. And that's where I learned, the term internal locus. And then there's external locus. And it does seem that communists or people that ascribe to those ideologies or similar ideologies have a severe case of external locus, meaning they blame everyone else. It can't be their problem. It can't be them.
Yeah, that is right. The society has ripped them off, has done them wrong, and they have to right those wrongs by dragging everybody else down to their level. Wow. Like if you look at the American Revolution, That was an able revolution. America is an able country. It's rewards loyalty. It rewards hard work. It rewards faithfulness and a kind spirit. But the French Revolution was a Cain revolution. That was about vengeance. It was about killing the king and killing everybody who disagreed with you. Two revolutions that happened roughly at the same time. And the communists in Moscow, when I had a friend training there, said they always regarded the French Revolution as the first communist revolution. And it was all about tearing down. America is an able country. It's about building up. Communism is about tearing down. And look at Satan, at God's side. He was so bitter and egotistical, and God had obviously mistreated him and was not giving him his due. So he think the heck with this and took the third of the angels with him and goes to hell and sets up his own kingdom and has spent the rest of his existence trying to bring us all down to his level. That's communism. Reagan had a great thing. He said, communism doesn't exist anywhere. Communism can only exist in two places, heaven or hell. In heaven, they don't need it, and in hell, they've already got
it. That is a great quote. And you're right. They do seem historically to focus on people that see themselves as downtrodden or are actually downtrodden. Not every government.
They will find real grievances, absolutely. But if they don't find real ones, they'll manufacture them or exaggerate them. They will pick the scab. They will build resentment whenever way they can. They're not about reconciliation or getting people through difficult things. They're about making everything worse. So people get so angry, they will lash out and they will revolt, and you get a bloody revolution and bring these scumbags to power. We're given a natural order of things. We have a model of society where you can work hard, you can be free, you have personal responsibility, you treat your fellow man well, you live by the golden rule, and that's what America was founded on. But that's not good enough for some people, because some people can't hack that. So they want to tear it all down and they want to rebuild the world in their scummy little image. That's the basic battle that we're facing.
So basically, anything that takes a little get up and go and a little grit and determination and effort, it seems to be the enemy of a lot of these people.
Absolutely. Well, it comes down to personal responsibility, isn't it? Your business failed. What the hell did I do wrong?
Right.
And Obama says, your business, you didn't build that. That was a community effort. No, you did build that. Yeah. You, by your sweat and your brown, and if it prospers, good for you. You did something right. And if it fails, learn from it and do it better next time. That's the American spirit. That's not the communist spirit.
Yeah, and I would even say that where a lot of these people, let's just, the ones in America, let's just call them liberals, leftists, whatever. There's a million terms. A lot of them were defending people like Bill Gates as one of their own, but they forget, I think he had 49 different versions of Windows before in his garage before he got it to work. So it's, that's a very, a very able type of mentality to do that, and does take grit and determination. And so when I see something like that, I'm like, yeah, but do you guys know how he got there? Or when people are jockeying for a position, as we see in even right-wing media, trying to be the number one star, and why does this person get to go to CPAC and I didn't? I'm like, well, that person's been around working for about 2 decades and has made their way to the top, and they're not being rewarded. That was part of their deliverable to themselves, was to get to this level. I do want to shift gears before we go.
Say the one complicating factor, in a free society, you can get to the top by being ethical or unethical. You get the mafia guys, who are dirty players, and they will still get some success. But in a communist society, you can only get to the top by being unethical. There is no ethical pathway forward. You have to betray your fellow man. You have to lie, cheat, and steal to get to the top. In an open society, you got two options. In a communist society, you got one.
Hey, can you kind of flesh that out a little bit? So what do you mean they have to? What are examples of having to be unethical to get to the top? Can you explain that?
Look, if you're living in a tyrannical society, you got to suck up to the leader. You can only advance by betraying your comrades or being a sycophant, or you do not advance on merit. You look at the Chinese society now; that the economy is on the verge of collapse because it's so darn corrupt that it's not what you know, it's who you know in a socialist society. So you're encouraged to lie, to steal, to cheat, to defraud. In America, people do that, and we catch as many of them as we can and put them in jail. But the best way you can succeed by being honest in America. You cannot succeed by being honest in a socialist country.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, let's get in front of us a little bit with for a lot of people throw around terms like socialism, communism, and I give people credit. I think in the last 4 years, those who didn't know what those terms meant have gone and learned what they meant, which I applaud. But there's socialism, there's communism, but then there's Leninism, Maoism, Trotskyism. I don't know if that's a thing.
Yes, it is.
Could you just, if you'll just, I'm sure that this is kind of like communism 101 for you, but for people like me who avoid terms I don't understand, I do of course understand socialism and communism. I try to stay away from the more detailed subsets of those. Could you maybe go through some of those just so people have an idea with maybe some current examples of what that would look like?
Yeah, for sure. Look, communism and socialism have been around for basically since Cain and Abel, But in the 19th century, under Marx, it was given a scientific veneer. Marx came up with this theory. He had the diggers and the levelers before that who thought people should own goods in common and nobody should have more money than anyone else. So there's always been that idea. But Marx came up with this theory that history is evolving and it goes through 5 stages of human development. The first is primitive communism, where everybody lives in a cave and you go out and kill a mammoth and you drag the meat back and you all share the meat equally. That's primitive communism. The next stage comes when you discover agriculture and you start to get little plots of land. Okay, and that leads, when you have a little plot of land where you're growing some corn or some berries or whatever, or a couple of pigs, somebody's going to try and steal that off you. Some lazy sod, some lazy socialist is trying to steal that off you. So you have to have a power structure. You have to have a local boss, a feudal boss who will protect your patch of land and you pay him tribute. So that's the feudal system where you have a local boss or a local warlord who protects the farmers and keeps the other people from stealing their stuff, but you got to pay tribute. You got to give him every 3rd son for his army or every 4th daughter for his harem, or 20% of your crop every year for his coffers. That's a feudal system, and that was most of the world for most of history. Lived on some version of the feudal system. The feudal lords of England, the feudal lords of China, etc. Then you get the 3rd stage of human development. You start to get the development of industry and the printing press and banking, and you start to get what they call a capitalist system, where people have built up enough capital in their agricultural business, they can now invest in a printing press or a little winery or a grain mill, or they set up a little bank to lend money. So you get the growth of capitalism, and that leads to explosive wealth. The communists acknowledge this. The capitalist system, the 3rd stage of human development, leads to explosive wealth, but it leads to inequality because some get rich and supposedly they make everybody else poor, which is complete garbage, But that's what they'll say. So you get a class of rich who exploit the poor. So therefore, the fourth stage of socialism is to take this amazing wealth created by capitalism and establish a socialist state which redistributes that wealth. That's the fourth stage. The fifth stage is when that all withers away and the state withers away, and you have this classless society where everybody has what they want and everybody, just lives in harmony.
Well, so that's the kind of their best case scenario that
the utopia.
The utopia.
It's never got beyond stage 4, because when have you ever seen in human history where a group has gained control of the wealth and power of a country, then voluntarily given it up and distributed it to the workers? So in reality, we go from primitive communism to feudalism to capitalism to socialism, and that's where human progress stops.
Gotcha.
And
that's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
That's where human progress stops. Yeah.
It never goes beyond that. It can't, unless there's a revolution from below that overthrows the social. Okay, that's the basic Marxist theory. So just in Christianity, you got a lot of denominations, right? You got the Catholics who believe one thing, Orthodox who believe another. There's 1,000 different denominations. Well, in communism, there's a lot of different denominations. And I'll go through some of the main ones. Lenin he's the Jesus of communism, right? He is the one who brought the law. He took Marx's laws and invented systems of applying them practically. How you take power in a country, how you destroy your opposition, how you ally at certain times, how you go 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, you zigzag. He was the tactical genius who brought Marxist ideas to power. But that caused more division because, Lenin took power in Russia, but you had Trotsky, you had Stalin, and that was the basic division. Trotsky wanted to he was like a holy roller. He wanted to get out into Europe and set the world ablaze with revolution. To hell with caution, to hell with planning, just get out there and the workers will rise up and we're going to sweep Europe. And Stalin was, no, that's crazy. No, you got to consolidate your power in one country, then you will spread it to another country and another country and another country through force. Trotsky thought people would just rise up and love the revolution. So
he doesn't sound like he learned anything from Marx then, if he thought that would work.
No, he didn't. He was an over-optimistic idealist. But a brutal man by his own.
Kind of reminds me of Mamdani a little bit. Every time I read about Trotsky, the more and more I learn about Trotsky, I think of Mamdani's, at least his character and his affect.
Yeah, I think so too. A lot of these young radicals are sort of the Trotskyists. They're very impatient communists. They're not very disciplined. Stalin won the day. Stalin had Trotsky executed as a rebel, as a just an adventurer, basically. Stalin knew how to send spies out to spend decades infiltrating a country, to do it slowly but methodically. Trotsky thought you could do it in a day, right? And that's still there's still a big split in communism today. The Trots are minorities.
Okay.
It's a little bit like Protestantism in the Catholic Church. The Trotskyists would call themselves the Protestants of the communist movement.
Interesting.
The Stalinists would call themselves the Catholics of the communist movement. And I'm not denigrating those faiths, but I get it. You've got a conservative majority and a more evangelical minority. Now, the Stalinist split when Mao came along, because, communism was all about industrial countries, the industrial workers will rise up. And that applied to Europe, though it never worked. But it didn't apply to China because it was a feudal society.
It was almost all ag, right?
It was all agriculture. So you didn't have an industrial working class. So Stalin also figured this out because he was in Russia, which was a pretty backward country. The revolution was supposed to start in Germany and England, in the United States, the industrial countries, where the capitalism had flowered, but it never did. So they had to force a revolution in the feudal countries. So what Stalin did, he thought, well, if we don't have an industrial working class, and Mao developed this, who else can we stir up to create trouble? I know, we'll focus on the minorities. We'll focus on the racial and religious differences. And Stalin came up with the idea of the nationalities question. In primitive societies, you find a minority, you tell them they've been oppressed by the majority, and you get them to start a revolution and overthrow the majority. Mao really developed that. That is why you will see the Maoists focusing so heavily on racial issues. Black Lives Matter is a Maoist organization. The Japanese reparations movement was run by the Maoists. The Freedom Roads, the current revolution in the anti-ICE thing, supposedly to protect the illegal immigrants, that's Maoist.
And they're always keeping that with the anti-ICE. You'll see they're always trying to anchor that race thing to it, even though I think like 60% of ICE agents are not white.
Yeah, exactly.
Real quick question before we go past Mao. It's interesting that Mao was focused on race because I had G. Van Fleet, who lived through the Red Terror or the Red Terror, and she was saying, well, Mao had a problem. He figured out the race thing, but she said, her words, we all look the same, so he had to create class divide.
Yeah, he did. And that's why you had the Cultural Revolution. There's pictures of people, somebody standing in front of the crowd with signs around their neck, and everybody would be throwing rocks at them because this man had 2 pigs and everybody else only had 1. Or this man had a little stall at the market selling vegetables and nobody else had that. So yes, they used the race card when they could. They developed Stalin, but they also had to bring back the class argument, but it was at a peasant level. It wasn't rich industrialists. It's the bourgeois peasants who had 2 pigs when everybody else only had 1 pig. They had to go down to that micro level. And that is, but in America, it was the Maoists who did all the Black Panther stuff of the 60s. It was the Maoists who supported Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam and Fidel Castro in Cuba, the Maoists who agitated for Aztlan, separate all of Latino workers away, give the Southwest back to Mexico. Wherever you see racial agitation, Maoists are prominent. You go to Sweden, the Maoists get amongst the Laplanders, the Samic, the Swedish Eskimos, and agitate for them. In New Zealand, they were doing it with the Maori races. Wherever you find racial agitation, you will find all the communists do this, but the Maoists specialize in this.
So would you say it's safe to say that, Maoist is more focused on race while a Stalinist is more focused on class?
Yes, I would say that. Though Stalin did develop the initial racial thing. And the other main branch, or 2 more branches of communism, Gramscianism, who took over from Lenin. Lenin and Marx thought the industrial working class would rise up all over Europe and revolt. And they didn't do it. So Gramsci, the Italian communist, came up with his theories. He said, why don't the working class rise up? It's because of cultural hegemony. They've been so brainwashed by the church, by the state, by royalty, by government, that they're brainwashed. So we have to create a class consciousness. We have to take over all the institutions so we can brainwash them in our way of thinking. Democratic Socialists of America is a Gramsciist organization, for instance. They take over the universities. They take over the schools, the Bible colleges, everything. They take over the textbook writing organizations, and they brainwash everybody into a socialist form of thinking. The Bernie Bros are the victims of Gramscianism.
And was he Italian?
Yes.
Okay.
He's a theoretical leader of the Italian Communist Party who died in one of Mussolini's jails, and he wrote his prison notebooks in the jail. So what you see in America now, most of the revolution that we see culturally, the transgender movement, the indoctrination, the political correctness, that all comes from a combination of Maoism and Gramscianism. But the kinetic stuff that we're seeing on the streets in Minnesota, and that's mainly Maoist. The rock throwing, the burning police stations, and that's Maoist.
So it's a Mao Gramsci plus a Maoist thing.
Yeah, what the revolution we're seeing is mainly Gramsci set the stage, and Mao is carrying it out. The violent side of it is mainly Maoist. These groups all overlap and whatever, but in broad categories, just like Christian denominations, all share central beliefs, but they all have slightly different emphasis. So you say Maoists focus a lot on race. Trotskyists just want to do everything today. Democratic socialists, which are Gramsciists, want to infiltrate all the institutions. So they all have their specialized areas. It's like an octopus. Each arm is slightly different, has a different function. But they
the head is communism.
Yes, the head is communism.
Okay.
There is a worldwide rush for gold right now and precious metals. China is buying gold. There are rumors that the Federal Reserve will be using gold to pay off federal debt, or the federal government will be using gold to pay off federal debt. Famous investors are buying gold. And there's a movement away from the dollar worldwide. And you can see that there are warning signs in the economy that appeared before the Great Depression in 2008 that are flashing red right now. So in all this instability, it is a very good idea to protect your savings, to protect your IRA by diversifying into precious metals, especially gold. There are a lot of gold companies out there. Not all of them are kosher. Not all of them are responsible businesses. American Alternative Assets really is. And we're very, very proud to have them as a sponsor. We're very picky about our sponsors, and we only accept sponsors who have products that we either use or invest in ourselves. So I really encourage you to go to cloutgold.com, cloutgold.com, and get a free report explaining to you what the risks are of not diversifying into gold and silver. And I just want to note that when Brian and I started talking about investing in gold 5 years ago, when it first became clear that you could do that easily, if we'd put in $1,000 then, it would be $5,000 now. If we'd put in $10,000 then, it would be $50,000 now, and so on. So obviously you can't predict everything about the future, but gold there's a limited amount of it on the planet. And in a time when you can have your assets switched off, if they're digital, like the truckers in Canada had their bank account switched off. People in Spain are having their bank account switched off. All of China is now on a social credit system. Your assets can be switched off. And Europe is pushing for central bank digital currency. Now is the time to diversify into gold.
Okay, so we're back with Trevor Loudon. Fascinating, and thank you. No one's ever explained it that well to me.
That makes sense.
That makes sense now, and it's actually just gave the audience a really useful tool. And hopefully you'll be giving that to Marshall's people too, where you're speaking in February.
How to spot them,
and
that's
very important.
You got to know your enemy, And there are 30 different communist parties in America. Some Trotskyists, some Maoists, some Democratic Socialists, whatever. And they all have different emphasis. And like if you want to know who's always burning the American flag, that's RevCom. They're the ones who always burn the American flag and take cases to the Supreme Court.
And those are like baby boomers, right?
Yeah, they are.
And for those that don't know, RevComs are the Revolutionary Communists of America, led by a kind of, in my opinion, creepy guy named Bob Avakian.
No, that's the Revolutionary Communist Party is RevCom.
Right.
Revolutionary Communists of America are a new group of Trotskyists. And they don't amount to a hill of beans. They're just silly trots. They will march through the streets and wave their flags, but they'll never achieve anything serious.
Isn't it amazing how the different branches of communism in America are as mushrooming and confusing as the acronyms that keep getting added to the LGBTQ plus.
Very similar, yeah. Because one thing about communism, communists they all hate each other. It's all about division. Satan was all about dividing. They're the kids of Satan, so they hate. If you're not pure, they'll kill you. If the communists ever got power in America, they would spend most of their time killing each other.
Sure. And how do you know what pure is when there's so many different versions of pure?
Well, that's right. Like Hazal Din of the American Communist Party will basically slag off every other communist party. They're all useless. They're all doing nothing. They're a waste of time. And if he got power, he would see that they all went to jail or whatever. But other communist parties will say exactly the same about him.
Okay, so looking at you're right. I mean, I would encourage everyone who's watching this to just watch some of these like live coverage of the ICE protests, the anti-immigration protests earlier last summer that were extremely violent, and just there's a lot of like ABC, NBC, like local affiliates. I know the New York affiliates and the LA affiliates. They'll run loops, just nonstop live coverage without any commentary. And I always encourage people to record those for the record, but go through them and look at all the different organizations, but they are all communist.
You're seeing. Look, how can you have riots all across America and people killed and buildings burned and nobody on the mainstream media will tell you that the people organizing all this are communists? If they were Nazis, they would tell you. But all of the riots we've experienced in America have been run by communists. The LA riots of 1992, the race riots in Chicago, in Detroit in 1963. All the riots of the Democratic Party convention of '68, all of them were run by communists. You don't have to say that, because you're not allowed to talk about communists at all. But they are the main. None of these things would happen without the communists involved, or none of them would get beyond a minor scuffle.
Right. Well, I got a question for you. Command and control. I mean, obviously, there's a shared ideology, but I understand the technology behind how these things are formed together. But it seems like we have a bunch of different communist groups that all come out for the same thing. They're all supplied through apps like Mobilize and everything. You'll see multiple groups on those, or like Action Network or Open Collective. But they are different groups. So is it kind of like it's almost like Lollapalooza, like a battle of the bands. Like they're all going to the same concert. You know what I mean? With the same strategic goal. Or we hate ICE, hurt them. But beyond that, it does seem highly coordinated. Have you ever seen direct coordination between these different groups, or are they just? I know a lot of them just follow the public directives. What do you see there?
Well, look, there is absolute coordination at a senior level between, say, the Communist Party, Liberation Road, DSA, in different cities, you'll see different combinations. Grand Rapids, Michigan, it's mainly DSA and the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. But in New Orleans, it will be Freedom Road and Democratic Socialist America, and probably Communist Party USA and Party for Socialism and Liberation. It varies around the country, but they all collaborate to some degree. There's a broad overall. Like if you're a Christian, you know the basic Christian message, and you know how to react to certain situations. If you're a communist, you know the basic communist method. Cops are always bad. Anybody on the right is automatically bad. We got to tear down the police. We've got to agitate people, get them angry, and we've got to start a revolution. They all believe that. The difference will be the Democratic Socialists will do one tactic, the Freedom Road will do another tactic, and so it's a division of labour. It's the PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Freedom Road, and Workers' War Party. They'll do the violent stuff.
Right.
But the indivisible types, they will do the organising and the social media, coordinating with the Democratic Party, coordinating with the unions. So around the country it's different, but they have a broad overall strategy. They all cooperate. They might hate each other and try and steal each other's members, but they haven't, like a lot of Christian denominations. They like the other denomination. They're not real Christians. They're not real Christians. Same with the communists. But they will all stand together against common threats and with common purpose. But then you've got the overall coordination, which is coming from Venezuela, from China, from North Korea, from Cuba, even from Russia today. So it goes above. These groups are being directed from overseas. Make no mistake about that. None.
You mentioned the American but by the way, when you were talking about the different groups coming together, even though they hate each other, all I could think of was the opening scene of Gangs of New York.
Yeah.
The all different gangs, the Tom
Dead Rabbits,
the Tom Flannerys, and all that. By the way, I heard totally unrelated. My dad is from Ireland, so of course I went through my period of studying everything that was Gaelic, Irish, And I heard, I don't know if it's true, that the name Dead Rabbits of that gang came from the fact that there was a Gaelic word or phrase that sounded like De Rabo, which meant big ugly tough guys, and someone had misheard it, like a journalist, and they thought the name of the gang was Dead Rabbits. It's an interesting piece of history there. Yeah.
Well, see, communists are political criminals. So you look at say the Italian mob. They have a commission to organise things and coordinate, and they have connections to overseas. Different groups overseas, and to the communists too, by the way. But then you will have, every mobster knows basically what their job is. They got to they can do this, and they will fight, they will compete, but broadly they sort of work in the same, in the same path. And that's how the communists. They are political criminals. They will work together when necessary. They might hate each other, but their overall game is to the gangsters want to enrich themselves. The communists want to destroy society. But they will work in similar manner. And people say, well, how can the communists how can they control whole areas? Well, probably 50 mafia ran Las Vegas for several decades, right? Because they had people on the take. They worked in secret. You didn't know always who they were. They controlled big unions. They controlled organizations. So 50 people can control a whole city. Well, Lenin studied gangsters. Saul Alinsky studied the Chicago mob. He was part of with Frank Nitti. So the communists adopt criminal tactics.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so therefore they can control. I'd say there's probably less than 100,000 really hardcore communists in America. But I would say personally they are more powerful than the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and that's interesting you bring that up because here in Brooklyn, I was encouraging. We just had a bunch of guests here for this big event at the Donald J. Trump Club for Brooklyn. But for the people from out of town, Illinois, those kind of places, they've seen my videos where I kind of do a montage of what I see on the streets here. And in Brooklyn itself, it's like the central communist hub of New York City. And you'll see, I'll walk down 3 blocks on my own block. You will see Marx, saying something. You will see something called the Big Table, and they're stealing all. They're stealing all the food, and it's all those Jews in Crown Heights that took it all. You'll actually see these things, and I record everything like that. Tons of refuse fascism stickers. The kind of manic radio show there that features actually Bob Avakian of the RevComs a lot. And then you'll see some really hardcore ones, like just a giant hammer and sickle spray painted on the side of a building. And this isn't just college kids, as someone had said when I posted that, doing their stupid socialism graffiti. These are printed high, really high quality posters that can stand up to the weather, and they're really hard to remove. So that's how I've been tracking the Brooklyn power centers. Is usually people put out more flyers from their home base and work out, and then they run out of them. But what I notice is these things go largely unnoticed by the general public. It's just more bills on a board. But when you see it, it does seem almost like a communication structure.
Oh yeah, it is. It's like dogs marking their territory.
Okay.
We are in this area. We are working in politics. We are here. We are altering things. We are moving things. Come with us. Come with us. Yeah, it's definitely a territorial thing, and they always like to make themselves appear much bigger than they already are. Well, Lenin, he took over the Menshevik party in Russia. He had a couple of thousand people. And he was the minority faction, but he called himself the Bolshevik. Bolshevik means big. Bol means big. So he called himself the big faction, even though he was very much a minority. But this is what they do. They always mark their territory. They put posters up so people think these guys are everywhere. No, they're not. There's about 50 guys in your neighborhood like that. But they spend every evening out putting up signs and doing this and doing that.
Yes. There's always fresh signs all the time, any weather. While some people probably conservatives, maybe MAGA, are watching this, a lot of them will lean back and they'll say, "Man, those lefties they're always playing with communism and everything." But there's a new thing I've seen happening, a new shift. And that is this infiltration or subversion of what is called the anti-establishment right, or the far right MAGA. And at first I saw it, I thought it was a meme or a joke, but they call themselves MAGA communists. And this is you'd mentioned the American Communist Party, formed in 2024 by Jackson Hinkle and Hazel Din. Hazel Din had come from the Democratic Socialists of America.
Jackson Hinkle had hung around with those guys too.
Right. And it does, based on a couple of interviews I've seen with Jackson Hinkle, I could have sworn he said in one of them that he's currently living in Russia. But he's always interviewed by the Chinese, Xinhua, and what is CCP? The other one. But the point is, when you see their talking points, they're really people need to pay attention because they gave themselves the nickname of MAGA communism. That wasn't given to them by Steve Bannon or Donald Trump. But what they're doing is really smart, I think, and I don't think people realize they're already singing their tune. A lot of people on the MAGA side, and let me give you an example of what I mean. when people are saying anti-imperialist and questioning everything our government is doing, while not putting the focus on our enemies, in particular Venezuela, Cuba, Syria, Iran, and China, and Russia. What's happening is these same people are the ones that are saying, but can we trust Donald Trump? But these guys are deep state too, and not all of them. But what's fueling that, and what that leads to, is a lot of divisiveness we've seen pretty much since the. I actually saw this interview of one of these MAGA communism guys over in China, and he says we focus on the anti-establishment right in America because they're working class like us, and this guy clearly wasn't working class, but he's like, but they're just like us, and they're not being heard by their leaders that they supported. They've been betrayed by them, and they're alone, and that's really, and he said it, he's like, that's our sweet spot for communism, and those are the ones that see communism, think, well, it's actually not that bad, and so we continue our focus on them. Have you seen the same thing, and who's fueling that? Who's funding that, in your opinion?
Well, look, 100%. And this is a subtle way of dividing and influencing the U.S. conservative movement to get more and more isolationist, to get more and more anti, so they don't trust anybody in our government, which is setting them up for a revolutionary turn. And so that's exactly what Hazeldin and Jackson Hinkle are doing. They're going for anti-woke, guys who are disgusted by wokeness, and they want a firm leadership. They get seduced into communism. This is really, communism had a bad rap. It's really a good thing. It's really a patriotic thing. It's really an American thing. They will have the MAGA communists will have conferences, and they'll have a big hammer and sickle and a big logo of Abraham Lincoln next to it. And we're the patriotic communists. Right. But listen to Hazeldin. This is what he says. He will say, I believe in revolutionary defeatism. China attacks America. I'm going to work for the Chinese victory, because that'll bring communism to America. So that's the patriotic thing.
Whoa.
He will say this explicitly. So we would call that treason. He would call that revolutionary patriotism. But you're right, and I'll tell you who's very much echoes of this, and this will anger many people out there. Tulsi Gabbard would be a great example of someone who's been deeply infected by the MAGA communist movement.
No kidding.
She used to go surfing with Jackson Hinkle.
No.
She works with him.
Oh my God.
Still participating with his. She was still holding rallies with him as late as 2023.
Holy! I've never heard this before. This is wild, and I'm not surprised, and I'll tell you why in a second. But go ahead.
Well, and now she's DNI, okay, Director of National Intelligence. See, this is how it works. Putin. The communists gave us wokeism. Wokeism is a combination of Gramscianism and Maoism. What it means, you're awake to issues of class oppression or homophobia or white privilege. And so we get this continual, every white man is a racist, white guys are toxic, all this, white people and especially young men are the worst people on the planet. So a lot of young men are thinking, I'm not. This is, they feel pretty aggrieved at this. So you get this anti-woke coming along through Nick Fuentes, through Vladimir Putin, through Tulsi Gabbard, through the MAGA communists. They will say we're non-woke communists.
Well, I don't think if I may, though, and not defending Nick Fuentes, I see Nick Fuentes, and I had to force myself to watch it because everyone was talking about it. I want to know what's going on. I see him as a problem for the MAGA communists because he's kind of pulling people in his own direction.
He is echoing their.
Okay.
No, this is what I say. Okay, you've probably heard of Alex Alexander Dugin, the Russian. Okay. Dugin is the patriarch of the anti-woke movement. He's always gone about conservative social values. So this is what MAGA communism is trying to do. This is what Dugin is trying to do. This is what Nick Fuentes is trying to do. This is what Curtis Yarvin is trying to do. You are trying to amalgamate the right wing of the communist movement with the left wing of the patriotic or fascist movement. That's really what it is. So you go to these conferences in Russia, they will have hardcore Stalinist, anti-woke, MAGA communists right there with Texas independence movement, with so-called right wing, sort of alt-right Nick Fuentes type people. They're trying to amalgamate. Nick Fuentes is trying to lead the young guys in more of a Nazi direction, but he is actually working together with some of the MAGA communist people. There's a big tie-up between this sort of neo-Nazi movement and the MAGA communist movement. You'll see this.
Is this a winning relationship? Like they're intentionally working together. We're heading in the same direction.
Well, no, they're intentionally working together because see what Dugin does. Dugin is loved by fascists all over the world. They work the neo-Nazis, they work the fascists, because they are promising these white supremacists and neo-Nazis, we're going to create a white socialist republic stretching from Vladivostok all across Europe and Canada. That's where the white man can live in peace and socialism. Right? That's what they promise the right. The left, then Dugin also works with the Stalinists, the hardcore left. We are going to bring revolution. We're going to more traditional communism. But see what you've got in Europe now is hardcore communists who hate the government and a lot of disaffected young men, conservative young men who also hate the government. And so they are working together to bring down the government. So it's sort of an attack from the right and an attack from the left, both coordinated by the Russians, Dugin, etc.
It's genius on the part of our enemies. It's genius.
Look, Nick Fuentes openly praises Alexander Dugin. Tucker openly supports Alexander Dugin. Many of these, but also Richard Spencer supports Dugin. So does David Duke support Dugin. So that you got this. We're given this. The young men are given this alternative. You hate wokeness. You want to feel empowered. You want a future. Well, you got a choice. The only way you can get rid of wokeness is to be a fascist or a communist.
And that either or is a very, that's the core of communism. It's
division. The scissors strategy, the right wing disaffection and the left wing disaffection. I would say to fight communism, you've got to be a constitutional, good American who stands for constitutional values, freedom of speech, what made America great. And there are plenty of laws on the books to take down the communists. If anybody's got the courage to apply them. Look, it's a 5-year felony to cross state lines to participate in a riot. That one law could have shut down Black Lives Matter.
That law's still on the books too.
It's still on the books. It was brought in 1968 after the riots at the Democratic Party convention in Chicago. Look, if that had been applied to Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, where they brought 10,000 people from out of state to burn that city, would we have had Black Lives Matter? Would we be having the anti-ICE riots of today?
Right.
No, we wouldn't. And I'll tell you another thing. Look, there's a big move towards anti-Semitism and among.
I was just going to ask you what is going on with that.
It is purely a Russian-driven phenomenon. and that's why you get people like Nick Fuentes promoting it. That's why you get Tucker Carlson subtly promoting it. That's because the pro-Russian people are also very much moving in the anti-Israel, anti-Semitism direction. Why? Because Russia wants to dominate the Middle East, and Israel is the main impediment. So you got to break the bonds between Israel and the United States. They've done this in the Democratic Party through using the left, Democratic Socialists of America, Palestine Youth Movement, the Hamas Front. They have been working on the left-wing Democrats. So now you got to break the bonds with the right. So you got to promote massive amounts of anti-Semitism on the right. Israel controls America. AIPAC is the big danger. Rothschilds are the big problem. The Jews aren't really Jews. All this kind of crap. That is all old Tsarist propaganda.
Really?
By Hitler, now brought back through QAnon, brought back through even the Ron Paul movements involved in this, brought back through the MAGA movement, the MAGA communist movement, not the MAGA movement. And so now you've got a large proportion of young conservative American males who are now openly anti-Semitic.
I've seen it, and so I had a different take, but your take makes sense as well, and maybe there's a bit of both here. I've been looking at it from a China perspective, because I know China wants their Belt and Road, their trade routes right through that area. They were meeting with Hamas in early June, July 2023, before October 7th, and right before the October 7th attack, something called the India-Middle East Corridor agreement was about to be signed between Israel, Saudi Arabia, India, and the United States, which would have directly competed with the Belt and Road. And I always kind of figured, well, it would make sense that China would want to get rid of Israel because they're in the way. They've already got deals, shored in with the Arabs. They got to get rid of these guys. Does that fit in at all, or totally off the mark?
Both. The Chinese and the Russians cooperate on this kind of thing. So the Chinese are more working the left. They're more working Hamas and the Maoists on the streets here. The Russians are more working the right.
Gotcha.
They're more working the MAGA communists. They're more working through some of the Candace Owens types.
Yes.
They're causing division on the right. The Chinese are working through the Black Lives
Matter,
etc. But they're all weakening support for Israel. And it used to be sort of taken for granted in America that Democrats pretty much liked Israel and Republicans supported Israel, and they saw Israel as a valuable ally and a bulwark against terrorism. Well, now the Democrats are pretty much broken with Israel, and a significant chunk, though not as big as they like to portray, on the right has also broken with Israel. Look, you get these people who will tell you that AIPAC is the biggest threat to America.
All the time.
Forget Russia, forget China, forget Cuba. Cuba's got 40 congressmen in their pocket. Iran has probably got another 20. But Israel's a problem. Russia's got 6 to 20,000 nukes trained at us. China gave us COVID. China gave us a response to COVID. China stole the 2020 and 2022 elections through their networks. But no, Israel's the problem.
China controls our military comms networks too, 5G.
They probably do. That's exactly right. Russia was infiltrating all of our government computers for years, recently. But no, Israel's the problem. So this is classic misdirection, and that's driven by Russia in the right and by China on the left. But the goal is to divide us, to weaken the Western alliance, so they can bring us down, can destroy us.
And isn't it crazy how now you're thinking about like during Biden, I wouldn't say
I was about to champion Russia,
but I had
less of an issue with Russia.
I'm like,
well, if Biden hates them, and I was saying this kind of naively, but I was like, well, if the Biden administration hates Russia, they must be good.
It must be okay. If Putin hates George Soros and I hate George Soros, he must be.
Oh, that's okay.
But that's a psyop. That is completely a psyop.
So that was by design. Did they put Biden into a position where he was intentionally over vilifying Russia?
Yeah, I think so. That was the flip that happened, the Great Reset under Hillary Clinton. The Democrats had always been quite friendly with Russia.
Right. Yeah, you saw the Blueberry Hill video where Putin is singing to all the stars in Hollywood in like two. Yeah. And I don't know if it's probably not public, but without going into detail, I can tell you I've worked with the Russian Spetsnaz back in the late '90s when I was in uniform, just on training and stuff like that. But like in areas around Chechnya and stuff like that. They were always not allies, but we worked with them. And I can honestly say I've never worked with the Israelis, but I've worked with the Russians quite a few times.
Well, the whole thing there is, about 2016, the Democrats flipped and started to paint the Republicans as the pro-Russian people.
And that was when
2015?
About 2016, the Great Reset, when Hillary Clinton, well, it might have been a bit earlier than that, when Hillary Clinton gave, I think, Lavrov the reset button. The reset.
Right.
And then you got Obama talking to what's his name, the Russian Prime Minister, saying, "Oh, when I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you." That was about the time the Democrats flipped openly from being more friendly to the Russians to trying to paint the Republicans as more friendly to the Russians. But Joe Biden, I write about in some of my books. Joe Biden was elected first of all with the help of the Council for a Livable World, which was set up by Russian agents. They've elected more than 40 senators now. No, 200 senators now. 40 of the current Democrats. The only Republican they ever elected was Richard Lugar, Obama's favorite Republican, who was completely in Russia's camp. So look, there is that was part of the psyop, Us Russians, we stand for traditional values. We're not woke. We don't like George Soros.
Right.
Americans should be with us. And the Russians started sending people to big American Christian conventions and talking about how we don't like the gays and we're going to stand against George Soros with you. This was a psyop, a massive
unbelievable.
Wow. And it's pretty easy to see how people get sucked into it.
I got sucked into it somewhat, and me. If you know my background, I should know better. I think a lot of that, my lack of just, and I'm not making this about me, but me as an example. I think what happened to let my guard down. Usually, I have a good 360-degree view around me of manipulation. And by the way, the worst I did was like, I think say, well, if I had to choose between the Russians and the Democrats, I was feeling like they were less of a threat. And of course, now I've woken up, saying it's Russia. They're always a threat in some way, shape, or form because of their fear of the United States makes them really dangerous. And so, but what I did notice was that like the comparisons of our woke recruitment videos to the big Russian dude, and of course MAGA is going to get right on board with that. They're like us. And then things like all of a sudden it's like Russia is the manly man of everything. And I remember when Putin was doing that brand when the Democrats were in power, it was kind of falling flat. Like him riding on the horse killing the tiger. That was falling flat because there was not a big enough sounding board. But he took himself out of that branding and he put his soldiers and the everyman and the everyday person. And I did see MAGA and a lot of conservatives, and I will say some kind of center leftists too,
young men especially, who saw that and say, I don't know, man. They're telling us we should hate these guys, but they seem pretty cool.
Wouldn't you think, you're a young guy who's getting woke messages shoved down up your nose every single day, and you're seeing, this Marines in high heels and all this kind of thing. You're thinking, they're not like that in Russia. They're real men. But this is the MAGA communist message. We are the manly communists. We are anti-woke communists. We believe men should be men and women should be women, and we're going to build a great socialist republic on that basis. We're not anti-woke stuff. But that is Russian messaging coming through the MAGA movement, the MAGA communist movement, through some of the libertarian movement. That's very, very deliberate 25, probably 30-year program now, since about the mid-90s, who split the American right. Because if you think about it, if you were humiliated by Reagan, who was a representative of the American conservative, wouldn't you want to split that movement? Wouldn't you want to weaken that movement for future adventurism, for future, Alexei Komov was sent here to go to American conservative meetings, and you get American Christians saying, Vladimir Putin's a lion of Christianity. He's going to save us from the Muslims.
Yes, I've heard that.
All this crap, But there's no reality behind it. We saw the tragic story recently. We all saw this of an American man who took his wife and 3 lovely little daughters to Russia because he didn't want them growing up in woke, gay, He goes to Russia and he's told if you join the Russian army, we'll put you on a job in welding or writing PR or whatever. So he joins the Russian army, gets sent straight to the front lines of Ukraine, and his distraught wife is appealing for help from God knows where.
Oh my gosh.
That's an extreme example of the messaging. I've seen QAnon types say, I can't wait for Russia to invade Canada.
I've seen it too.
Milking them as liberators.
Yes, I've seen it too. Now, and I got to be careful here too, because it's like I also don't believe that Ukraine is the last thing holding back the Russian invasion, as the left has tried to sell us on. And I've always made the argument, if Ukraine are the last men standing, and if they fall, then all is lost. And they've supposedly been able to hold Russia for 4 years now. Well, then what the hell is the EU worried about? Do they not have any army? Are they saying the Ukrainian army is the only army that can fight? If it's even fighting, it's like, so how do you square that? Because it's kind of like and not my opinion, just based on my research, I've always seen Ukraine as a bit of a big money laundering scam, big time.
Well, look, when was most of that money laundering? That was when Biden was in power. And the Russians were still controlling Ukraine.
Right.
And Biden was always Russia's man. He was in the 70s. He was going to Russia on a regular basis, working with the Russians to oppose the Reagan agenda. He was always Russia's guy.
Biden. So I just want to state that for the audience. Biden was always Russia's guy.
Look. There's memos been discovered. Vladimir Bukovsky discovered memos in the Russian archives from Biden to the Russian leadership saying, look, I'm coming to Russia for domestic consumption. I have to criticize you guys. I have to criticize your treatment of Jews. But I am with you. This is what he said in the memos that have been discovered.
What are these memos? Just because I know a lot of people are going to want to look them up.
Look up Vladimir Bukovsky and Joe Biden memo Russian leadership. I'll find it, and I'll put it in there. And he's basically saying, look, I'm coming to Russia. He used to go to Russia quite a lot, Soviet Union. And this was one memo said, look, I'm going to have to criticize you publicly for American consumption. Look like I'm against you guys, but I am with you. Don't worry, I don't mean this crap.
How about that?
He wrote that, and he's always so Russia invades Ukraine, and first of all, when Ukraine became independent in 1991, they had between 800 and 1,800 Russian nuclear weapons on their soil. Okay. And they wanted to keep them for logical reasons. Bill Clinton forced them to give them all back to Russia. Plus cut back their conventional army, plus cancel some of their own weapon systems. So they went along with that under the so-called Budapest Memorandum, and they were given nebulous security guarantees by both, I think America, Germany, Britain, and Russia. Russia promised never to compromise their territorial sovereignty, and the Americans sort of said, "Well, we'll help you out if they do." So when Obama's in power, the Maidan Revolution, and most of the people on the right believe the Maidan Revolution was a CIA coup orchestrated by Victoria Nuland, and it was to help keep the money laundering in place. I have a very different view of that. I think it was a genuine revolution against Russia, essentially. Putin got very pissed off at that, and what did he do? He invaded the Crimea and the Donbass with his so-called little green men to defend the oppressed people in the Donbass, which is a complete fiction. So Obama did nothing about that because Obama was also in the Russian camp, had always been in the Russian camp, from Frank Marshall Davis onwards, Then what did Biden do when they finally invaded Ukraine? He basically did nothing because he thought it was going to be all over in 3 days. But then American public opinion and people in the Senate forced him to at least pretend to help Ukraine. And he would send a little bit here and a little bit there, and he'd invite Zelensky and say, "We are with you." Then the weapon systems would never turn up. And the money that was promised would never turn up. But what could Ukraine say? They couldn't say, "You're a bunch of lying, reneging scumbags." The American public would say, "What an ungrateful little sod you are. You're getting nothing from now on." So Zelensky would keep coming over here, kowtowing to the Democrats to try and get at least something.
Gotcha.
Something. So look,
but who was behind these massive pro-Ukraine things? I mean, they're everywhere. You go to the Hudson Valley today, and you'll see the spread of Ukrainian flags. Ukraine was everywhere. I mean, they were using the same texting system that COVID was using. I know this because when go ahead.
There's two parts to this. There is a big Eastern European contingent in Ohio, Pennsylvania, upstate New York. A lot of people from Poland, a lot of old guard.
Right.
So there's that. But also the Democrats were on the kick. We want to hang the pro-Russia stuff on the Republicans. Here's a chance to stick it to Trump. And Trump has played into this by being so darn equivocal on the Ukraine. He's made it easy. And so Democrats can paint themselves as patriots. We're standing against the tyrant Putin. Some sections of the left would regard Putin as a fascist rather than a communist. So they would join in. Liberation Road, for instance, set up which are Maoists. They set up a pro-Ukraine organization.
It was all the same people that were the Roe v. Wade, the anti-state kickback, Roe v. Wade thing. That was all the same. Open Collective Action Network, mobilized crowd there. The anti, SCOTUS 6 was the name of that campaign. The BLM. The pro-vaccine, the pro-lockdown, the pro-mandate. These are all the same people, and then they were the pro-Ukraine.
And this made it even harder for conservatives like myself to support Ukraine.
Right.
Because all the lefties are doing it. Biden's pro-Ukraine, so how can I be pro-Ukraine? But if you really look at what, when they invaded Crimea, Obama was obligated to help, but blankets. Trump actually did more for Ukraine when he was in power. Sent them missiles. And when they invade again, what does Biden do? Virtually nothing, really. If Biden had said to Putin, if you don't back off out of Ukraine, you're going to get heavy sanctions, boots on the ground, back off now. Putin would have backed off. Biden said a limited incursion into Ukraine would not warrant an American response. What more of a green light did Putin need than that? So this idea that Biden was Ukraine's best friend is absolute crap. Then they get Zelensky over here and make him go to a Kamala Harris event out in Pennsylvania, which was a perfect propaganda operation to get all the Republicans hating Zelensky. Zelensky didn't want to do that. But what's he going to do? He's not going to get anything if he doesn't do what the Democrats tell him. They made him go to the United Nations and rant on about global warming. You really think Zelensky? I don't
disbelieve you, but I
don't feel global warming in Ukraine.
Right. Yes. And I definitely got to look into this because it's a different take than I've had, but it makes a lot of sense. So I'm certainly hearing what you're saying, and he just doesn't. You're right. He does all of a sudden support things like the global warming and stuff. That I always
really cares about that crap.
I always kind of saw I did always get the feeling like he was kind of like one of those organ grinder monkeys that you see in the old reels. Like okay, now go perform over here.
Well, that's what he was made to do. But did you know Zelensky, when he had his comedy, when he's a comedian, he used to do a show
where he's the president.
Well, no, but before, as well as that, he did a show where he would talk to he would talk to Benjamin Franklin and talk to Thomas Jefferson and talk about the ideals of the founding of the American Republic. Nobody knows.
I didn't know that.
All you hear about is what he did with his, with his piano tricks and all this kind of stuff. No. Look. People say, "Oh, he's so corrupt. He's this and that." Any other world leader who is faced by invasion of a major power, attempted to assassinate him, and is offered free passage out of the country, and he says, "Screw you. I want bullets, not a air ticket." He has put his life at risk for several years against several attempts to assassinate him. If he was this corrupt individual, why wouldn't he just take his money and go and live his life in Riviera?
That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, look at the leader of Afghanistan. He didn't really stick around too long, did he?
It's not a big history of that.
When we pretty much gave Afghanistan to the Chinese.
Yeah. Well, you look. There was a document. There was a conference in Moscow in June last year, and my wife and I got it all translated. The document from the conference, and it was all about Moscow 2050, and they laid out the plan for Russia in 2050, and it was all. This was Lavrov, the foreign minister, spoke there. Several senior Russian foreign ministry officials were there, but so was Elon Musk's dad, so was Julian Assange's dad, so was Scott Ritter, so was Jackson Hinkle, so was all of these Russian influencers, so was Blumenthal, I think, as well.
Max Blumenthal, yeah.
And what the document said, he said, we're going to have a multipolar world, but Russia by 2050, we are going to have 150 million people under our military control in Eastern and Central Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. That's what they said. I know, but no, Putin just wants Eastern Ukraine, right? No, he doesn't. He wants control of all of that region, plus the Middle East, which is why they're trying to destroy Israel, plus Latin America, which is why they're going to let Venezuela go, plus parts of Africa, which is why they're now controlling Niger, Ivory Coast, and Burkina Faso.
But isn't
that a joint? I mean, all the countries, all these areas you're naming, those are also big-time Chinese interests. So are you saying there's a
collaboration? But
okay.
Burkina Faso, and that's a Russian thing. Well, China will not be controlling Poland and Czechoslovakia and Romania. That'll be Russia. See what the goal is. This is Kurdish Yavin. This is Alexander Dugin. It's multipolarity. Russia will control Europe. Russia will control sections of Latin America and Africa. China will get the rest, and America supposedly controls the Western Hemisphere. But what it's really about is if we do that, Russia and China will then gang up on us.
Of course.
We'll be done. We'll be over.
What about Turkey?
While we're on the subject, because they seem to want the Middle East too, and their military's come a long way.
Turkey is absolutely should not be in NATO. Should not be an ally.
Right.
The headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood. They want to supplant Iran as the dominant power in the Middle East. Why are they in NATO?
I always wondered that, and my
go ahead.
Sorry.
They can't be trusted.
No, they never.
Oh, they never could be.
I mean,
even Ukraine knows this. Like, remember back when Turkey said, "Oh yeah, they got on board with the rest of NATO, definitely sending these anti-aircraft missiles." And then when the time came, they're like, "Nah, we're not gonna."
Exactly. So look, the world is in many ways, what Reagan faced in the 80s has come back, but only stronger. There is an evil empire again. Unfortunately, it is Russia, it is China, it is Iran, it's Venezuela, it's Cuba, and some of the nations of Europe, and a lot of American politicians.
Yeah.
And influencers.
And influencers in the Communists. We know a lot of so-called conservative influencers are getting paid by Qatar. A lot of them have been caught taking money from Russia to push the Russia is nice narrative, push Islam can be tolerated narrative. Those Muslims aren't so bad after all,
Trevor. So while we're talking about that, so we had got on the subject with influencers, and
would end up.
When I first even thought about influencers for pro-communist stuff, it really was Kim Iverson. I don't mind naming her. I did a whole show about it. When she was like, "Oh, Maduro's not that bad. Maybe that bad." And then I went way back to when she was on the Hill. And there's a great episode. I'll send you the link. I'll put it from mine. I clipped all these things. I looked at everything she had ever done on video. And she's on the Hill, and she starts talking about the Uyghur camps being a hoax, even though. And Ryan Grimm, who was her co-host, who ironically is working with Max Blumenthal now.
But strange, and it surprises me.
I think they
need to pay for the mortgage, is what I think. But he's sitting there like his face was great though. He's like, What is he says, what is this? And she's like, China's great, blah blah, China, and she's one of these. It's the U.S. fault that all these nations, these communist nations, are aggressive. And of course Israel. It can't just be the U.S. It's always Israel. And what I notice is that's the network. But that network, one of the branches of this kind of like, I call it the Comintern 2.0, the online influencers. I was like, well, I can't find a connection between her and China, for instance. I know her, but what I did find was this thing called the Shira Shem Award. And it was in her Wikipedia that was taken down, and she claims because she was censored. And I was like, they don't take down your Wikipedia. I mean, my wife is much more well known than her. They manipulate your Wikipedia. They don't take it down. So someone took it down for her. But I found this award in there, and this Shira Shem Award is about this Iranian journalist. It's in her name and all that, for integrity and truth in reporting. And then I looked at the recipients of it, and the recipients are
Max Blumenthal, Jimmy Dore, Kim Iverson, the entire Gray Zone, many others that we know. So when you trace that back, that goes to, I believe it is called the American Investment in Progressive and integral or something, basically American companies. But the acronym, ironically, is APAC. It's ultimately funded by the Syrian Socialist Nationalist Party, which was kind of eclipsed by Assad's Ba'ath Party right before he was coming out of power. But now Assad's living in Russia, and these people are still being funded, and it looks like a lot of the funding for a lot of these influencers is coming through Syria as well, not just Qatar.
Look, absolutely, but this is the ideological streams are coming out of Russia through Iran, but the funding is coming from Turkey and Syria and other places. But where's it ultimately coming from? But that's exactly right. So what Kim Iverson's doing is she's saying, well, no, Venezuela's okay. Why are we going for regime change in Venezuela? The fact that they're sending us drugs, that they emptied their jails of criminals and drug addicts and sent them here, the fact that they're hosting Hezbollah and Hamas and the Russia and China and Cuba, that would be reason enough for wanting regime change in Venezuela, I would think. But who defends Venezuela? Tucker Carlson, Tulsi Gabbard, Kim Iverson, Max Blumenthal. This is all a Russian propaganda.
And it's always the same. And Jimmy Dore. He's just blatant. And actually, MAGA communism in that Jinhua interview I saw.
They're always going down to Venezuela too.
They also love they love Jimmy Dore. They just name him right out. Like, yeah, he's our main guy for influencing the far right. He says them. But also, go ahead.
Well, you see, Jackson Hinkle will go on Tucker Carlson and talk just like a MAGA guy, but he's the head of the American Communist Party. And when I point that out, people say, he's not a communist.
He is. He's not hiding it.
Go to his X page. He says he is. But how does he talk? He says, look, I'm a conservative, but we shouldn't be going up. We shouldn't be wasting our treasure going for regime change in Venezuela. We shouldn't be bothering the Cubans. We should leave the Chinese alone. They're only a threat to us because we keep hassling them. They were a threat to us when they started sending fentanyl to our country and doing all the other things that we
or sending their United Front right to our country under Obama's nose, who knew about it under Operation Foxhound, just kidnapping Americans. But they also it's interesting that you mentioned the Venezuela thing, because there's so many conservatives who are like, yeah, the gray zone. They talk to me like do you like the gray zone? I'm like, are you kidding me? And
why does Max Blumenthal have webinars with the Canadian Communist Party? Because he's a conservative. But because they give this peace message, you can understand it. So if you're a veteran who'd spent 10 years in Iraq or Afghanistan in a futile war that you never understood, and then pulled out and left all your dead comrades behind, you would be a bit concerned about Americans' foreign policy. That's what the communists exploit.
I'm so glad I was in the intelligence world, because I can see the grand strategy. I can see the tactical, strategic, and the practical, as I say. And there's also as you're talking, I'm thinking the messaging by, let's just call them the American communists, is always we should always be in this defensive posture. We should never have a good offensive defense. And what I see Trump doing with the move on Venezuela, totally. That really puts strain on China, and then really hurt Cuba oil-wise. And then he leaned on Mexico just last week, and now I think Cuba's down to like 3,000 barrels a day from a high of 47,000. They have 15 to 20 barrels days worth of barrels left of oil in Cuba. And what I see here is like 1, 2, 3, 4, taking back the Western
Hemisphere.
I never
thought it was about like these drug boats. I always knew it was about
way bigger than that.
And it's like, but these are you have like there can be only one global hegemon, and even if Russia and China kick us completely off the world stage, they'll go at each other. I mean, there's always one. And go ahead.
I was going to say, I've been to see multipolarity is a Russian Dugan concept. I've been to conservative conferences here, but people go and say, I can't wait till we see a multipolar world. Like this is a good thing that America. Who would you rather have as the top dog in the world?
Exactly.
Would you rather have Russia or China or America as the leading light in the world? Which would make you feel safer? And I'm not blindly America right all the time. No, but I look at Russia and China. I do not want them anywhere near world power. But multipolarity hands them a third of the world each, and they'll only be about 5 seconds until they get together and take the rest of it. So this is the depth of Russian propaganda in the American conservative movement, where they think it's a good thing that America would not be the world leader. This is going to somehow make things better.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, because I'm trying to come back to a point we talked about before the show. So I'm trying to. So we have the. And I think these influencers, and stop me if I'm wrong. They kind of want us to. They want the American public to put pressure to kind of be in this hands-off defensive posture forever. I think some true believers think it's wrong to be aggressive. I say, you gotta be aggressive to have peace. You have to have strength to have peace. That's where I feel. And also, if we hang back. China and Russia aren't stopping. I mean, China has shown this with their fishing armadas, and China has shown this with the expansion of the Belt and Road, and even putting military bases on Cuba. And what I had seen, and it was really keeping me up at night. You and I may have talked about this. There was a pretty rapid expansion of Chinese influence through the Belt and Road that was surrounding us. There's only one country left in South America that's not in the Belt and Road. One country, and I'm like, we are really kind of screwed here. And so when I look at it through the sense of like playing the game Risk, right? Like we were kids. I think everyone should have to play that game, once a month, for the rest of their lives. Because you're like, guys, we are being surrounded. This is happening.
It's a realism back. Yeah, most of Latin America is now under Chinese control, including Mexico. Mexico has a communist president, Schindler. The last one, AMLO, was also a communist. All together in the Sao Paulo Forum, which is the
Lula.
And guess what? Democratic Socialists of America, Zoran Mandami, Rashida Tlaib, they are associate members of the Sao Paulo Forum, which is a Cuban operation for bringing revolution to America. Look, we can. This idea. See, this is the idea. It's promoted through the libertarian movement and by the communist left. We shouldn't be interfering around the world. Right. We shouldn't be projecting American power. What's going to happen if we don't? The bad guys take over. The people who are telling us this are agents of the bad guys. They are traitors to America, whether on the left or the right. I want America to be the number one power in the world, going forward forever, as far as I'm concerned. And next 100 years anyway.
And Trevor, I know we're not really over our time because I never really set a time, but I don't want to keep you forever. It's getting close to dinner time, but not for me. But I would say we see this going back to the tactical level at the influence level. And by the way, as we're talking, I hope the audience can feel and visualize what I'm feeling. Like once we start talking about the big giants who are really running this war, Russia, China, America, I hope you realize how little these causes matter that people are so passionate about.
LGBTQ, these things, they don't matter at that level. They don't care. These things are just stuff they give the kids to keep them busy while the adults beat each other up. That's how I feel. But this idea of the DSA, the communists as DSA, attaching themselves to the Democrats and taking them over, which is happening. The squad are all DSA. Mamdani was DSA. That Feta guy in Minnesota, DSA. All the politicians that recently spoke out against Venezuela, I checked them all out from Texas to Maine. They're all DSA, and that's not even a political party.
Yeah, 100%. It's a movement that infiltrates the Democratic Party. Look, they have got council members on all the main blue cities, from Chicago to Seattle to whatever. They've infiltrated the Congress tremendously. DSA is more powerful inside the Democratic Party than the Democratic Party is, right?
They are, and that's why like Hakeem Jeffries and all these people have been kowtowing to these far left. The far left is the DSA.
The DSA controls the unions, and the unions control the Democrats.
Yes. And when I walk down the street one block away, you will see they have Dan Goleman's face up there, calling him a traitor, and you look, and it's a DSA organization. They have Hakeem Jeffries. They had Hakeem Jeffries' office get attacked by the Red Green Alliance type people just at the beginning of the summer, and he's a Muslim. I'm like, okay, so that made sense. But then you also have the MAGA communists or the American Communist Party not trying to take over the Republicans, kind of trying to scuttle them and divide them and chop them up.
Divide them and move their foreign policy to a more appeasing, to a more non-interventionist.
Right.
I'm not one who believes America should be intervening in every single struggle in the world. But yes, America has a strong interest in taking Venezuela down. Yes, America has a very strong interest in taking Cuba down and making sure that Israel is not destroyed and making sure that Europe stays free.
Exactly.
Have a strong influence and my country, New Zealand. I would like that to stay free. That's going to happen if America stays strong. So we the war that Reagan fought is still with us.
It is. We never.
The trouble is, the left has always been very iffy on that, and now large chunks of the right are getting unreliable on it too.
Well, the question I wanted to ask you when we talked about this is a bit of a forced segue, but it seems like things are going by the numbers on the influence side. It seems like the right is getting pretty scuttled. Okay. And quick sidebar here for all the people that are like, oh, Charlie Kirk was killed by Israel, which makes no sense.
Who started that rumor? That was Max Bloom.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you saw that too. I've been screaming it from the rooftops. And by the way, you know who one of his colleagues are? As Kai Pritzker.
Related to the famous Pritzker.
That is J.B. Pritzker's nephew and the son of Penny Pritzker, who was the Secretary of Commerce under Obama, and he's one of the activists that's always in the Venezuelan embassy a few months ago, trying to block ICE. But the question I have for you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, this is intergenerational.
Yeah. I know idiocy is hereditary apparently, but the question I have for you is: Has this happened before? We talked earlier about Czechoslovakia and the model for how to take over countries by the USSR at the time. You would know better than I. I'm not a historian. You're much deeper in that than I am. Is there an example of this historically? Have they done this before?
Yeah, well, look. The Soviets in the late 80s, under Gorbachev, were talking about how the world communism will be advanced through the Czechoslovakian model. And what they were referring to was this: when Stalin conquered Eastern Europe, he imposed communism on Poland and Romania and whatever, but he didn't impose it on Czechoslovakia. He didn't have the strength to do that. But what they did was infiltrate the Czechoslovakian political parties, particularly the left one. And when there was an election after the war, the Communist Party got two cabinet posts. I think one was national security and one was police. and they use that to come after all their enemies. A bit like what Biden did with the CIA and the FBI, etc. And so in 3 years' time, they had so disrupted the right, so paralyzed the right, and so divided the right, and taken out all their enemies, their business enemies and whatever. In 3 years, the communists won in an election in 1948, and it was communist from then after. So this is the model. You get a left-wing party in power. You divide the right as much as you possibly can. You intimidate your enemies. You go after your enemies. You use the state, like the IRS went after the Tea Parties. Certain conservative business people got a hard time. The EPA went after them, etc. You do that. And you infiltrate the main left-wing party full of communists, and then you take over, and then you finish the job, and you impose it. So that was the Biden was following the Czechoslovakian model of 1948.
And it does seem like it's going even stronger now since Biden.
Well, it is, because Trump was a bit of a disruptor. So now they're having to use more kinetic stuff as well.
Oh, that explains that.
You're seeing the same thing happening in Canada, same thing happening in Britain, same thing happening in Australia and New Zealand. So this is the Czechoslovakian model for taking over country largely peacefully. But when that gets disrupted, they have no qualms about going kinetic. I believe we'll see a lot of kinetic stuff on our streets this year. I hope I'm wrong. But you see the radical Muslims are getting prepared for jihad. You've got Chinese operatives here. You've got a radical left that hates Trump and hates conservatives and hates America. I think they're going to go for broke this year.
I think they're doing it. They
are doing it.
Minnesota. In just a few days, Minnesota was going on, but you also have LA, Sacramento. Of course, I don't count Portland because they're always doing it. But it's Ohio. I think there's one, and then don't forget there was, and I covered this on an episode, Alameda Coast Guard base this past fall. They had a guy try to ram through the Coast Guard because ICE was staged out of there with a U-Haul. Just gunned it backwards and like stop. It was actually a peaceful protest up till that point, and I had caught the whole thing on a loop. And that U-Haul had been sitting there for 3 days as part of those protesters, and no one covered it. They're like, well, then this U-Haul just showed up. I'm like, that U-Haul has been there for days, and he tried to ram it through, and they opened fire. It was shocking, and we don't really know what happened to the driver. I think he got killed, but for some reason they've really covered up what happened with this. And then you see the violence in LA at the beginning of the summer. You see the attack on a Chabad here. It's right down the street from me right now. Crown Heights. Guy trying to ram his car through that. It was insane. There was someone stabbed on video coming out of Crown Heights just 3 weeks ago. The concept, when I start looking at it, I start looking at everything, saying, and the way we look at terrorism is we would look at the act when we'd investigate terrorism back when I started in that field in the early 90s. We would look at everything from thefts of cars leading up to a terrorist attack, bank robberies, anything like that. And if you take all these things into focus around the 50 states, you can see an increase in the volume of certain types of kinetic type of violence, seemingly senseless violence. I think we are under attack right now, but just like the revolution and the Civil War, a lot of Americans will never see it because it's not like someone's like, I now declare we are at war. It just starts happening.
It's all grey warfare. It's all below the rate. Like there'll be violent incidents in that, but you'll never say nobody's going to come and say this is from the Russian chain of command. This aspect is from the Chinese chain of command. This axis is from the Iranian chain of command. But it is all foreign directed. And I got a friend in California, and she was campaigning in the last election. She was finding all these Uzbeks and Kazakhs driving Uber, sleeping in supermarket car parks all over LA. And they come there and they have these jobs provided for them. They have a house to live in. And they're just going around delivering to Jewish delis and Jewish daycare schools, mapping out.
Oh my God.
So what is going to happen when the big order comes?
Oh my God!
Wow! So this is not going on just in LA, and we've got large numbers of Chinese military age people coming across the border. Plus, we got probably a million Chinese nationals here in our research institutions, and our colleges, and our farms, and wherever they are. When the signal comes, they were going to be good, loyal Americans, are they? They're going to just stand by your local sheriff and combat the bad guys. Look, Xi Jinping said World War III will be fought on American soil. They intend to do that.
We have to end it pretty soon, but I want you to have the last word and take as long as you want.
What can be done, and what is your recommendation for people if they want to learn more about this to hopefully combat it? I mean, don't spend too much time learning because the war is raging. But you do need to go in with some, your eyes open as much as you can. What do you recommend people do in terms of like how do you spot it in your neighborhood? Then how do you fight it? And then where can they learn more about it?
We've got to. Every American patriot's got to be thinking, how do I protect my local area? Say if there's power outages, there's a terrorist attack, there's a poisoned reservoir, or whatever. So what are my local power structures? Is the sheriff trustworthy? Are we got local pastors who are willing to form self-defense teams? Who's got the medical skills? Who's got the military skills? Where do we assemble if something happens? How do we protect our families? How do we ensure medication for our elderly people? Who's got the beef farm? All of that. We got to be setting these networks up in every area we can, especially in the rural areas. We got to be urging President Trump to do a hard line on these protests. Like he knows he's going to get called a fascist and a Nazi, but he's going to get called that anyway. At least if you're going to get called it for doing the right thing. When the Freedom Road Socialist Organization tried to start the riots in Los Angeles, and that was all them. That was a Maoist communist group, the same people that did the George Floyd riots. He called in the National Guard from out of state and shut it down. If they'd left it to Gavin Newsom, it would have spread across the country. Well, he did the right thing then. That would have gone nationwide had he not called in troops from out of state to shut it down. He has to do the same thing to Minnesota now, because it's going to be all over the country in 2 months if he doesn't.
2 months. 2 months. You think so?
Absolutely. As spring comes on, they wanted us to make this the hottest summer America's had since the Civil War. Seriously. So he needs to be doing that, and we need to be pushing him to do it. And I would suggest watching people like yourself, Jeff Nyquist, another one who's really reporting on this kind of stuff. Cliff Kincaid was also doing stuff. Jeff Nyquist, me and Jeff and Johnny Anderson do a weekly program. Look up Jeff Nyquist, Trevor Loudon. You'll find we regularly comment.
We'll put it up for you guys.
But you guys like yourself, you're talking about this kind of stuff when nobody else is talking about it. God be following you, following me, Jeff Nyquist, and a few others. But we got to have our big eye on the midterms. We've got to make sure the left doesn't take over, and we got to be defending our local communities. And we've got to be pushing the government in every way to take a hard line with the left. Nothing illegal. This isn't tyranny or illegal. This the Communist Suppression Act, the law that prevents people from crossing state lines to participate in riots, the Insurrection Act. All of these are legal avenues to stop a foreign-directed revolution, creating mayhem on our soil, wrecking our economy, and possibly destroying the country. We've got to be doing this. We've got to treat this seriously.
And I would
I'd add one more thing
that we
have to
constant.
I have a 14-year-old, right? And he's in the wokest Boston area in high school. He's doing fine because I'm his dad. And Naomi's a stepmom, and it's like he's got a good mom, good solid Greek family. But the Greeks that are in real estate, they're not down with any sort of nonsense prospect. But I think education is so important. And I do know we started the show by mentioning our friend Marshall, who was going to be hosting you. I just want to say again for the audience, and before I do that, let me ask you this. I think in talking to Marshall the other night, I saw him last night. Really, the plan is to get people like you. He wants me to come to a couple services, which I'm happy to do. I told him I'd waive any fees I have to educate people here in Brooklyn, people that don't have a beef farm nearby, and they do have a lot of food deserts in poorer parts of the cities. To educate them on how to spot communism and what it looks like and what the friendly faces of it look like. And he said, and when he asked me the other day, he said, well, how do I know? He said, how would I spot a communist movement? They're not always going to call themselves communists. I said, no, it's a really good. I said, you will spot them very easily when they use the big show techniques to get people out there. So in the Middle East, certain people, maybe myself, would use things like, I don't know, really hot women to get people to watch a certain TV channel. What the socialists here in New York do is they make it kind of the cool kid thing to do. And so what I told Marshall, I said, we've got to make being a patriot and being a capitalist and being the strongest nation on earth, because as well as the best nation on earth, that's got to be the cool kid thing. And I think MAGA kind of lost their momentum, but was heading that way, and they got to get back on track with that.
Well, it's been deliberately sabotaged. Look, I wanted to give an example here.
Please.
Look, my friend Jimmy from Brooklyn told me this, and he read it in a communist publication from the 40s. How do you recruit young black men to the Communist Party? You hold dances, and your communists hold a dance, and they invite black women. And the black. This is what they said. The black woman will be flattered to be invited to a dance, a white organized dance, and bringing the women in will bring the black men in. That's how you recruit black men to the Communist Party. So how cynical. How pathetic and how racist is that? But that's reality.
That's reality.
You look at people's weaknesses. Well, we got to make it cool to be pro-American. We got to make people understand this is the greatest nation that's ever existed. The hope for mankind, one that's done more to lift people from poverty than any other, done more to spread faith around the world than any other, the one that stood for human rights better than any other. This is the country to glorify, and hopefully others will emulate it. Be proud to be an American. So we got to do that. You're right. Educate, especially the young guys. The answer to wokeism isn't to be a little Nick Fuentes Nazi. The answer to wokeism is stand up for American values, support the military, support your police, support what is great about America, support American free enterprise, and be proud of it. That's the answer.
Yeah, that's
right. Yeah, that's right. And I would even say, don't get into a Kitty Genovese type of mentality. She was the woman who was murdered in the apartment complex back in the 80s.
That's right.
And everyone looked down and saw it happening. Like dozens of these people living there. And the reason, and not one of them called the police. And the reason why that happened is they all thought their neighbors were going to call the police, so why bother? And we have to get out of that mentality in this country too. Of like, Trevor's he's all over it, and Jeff is all over it, Brian's all over it. Everyone has to be all over it.
Because I think this is a spiritual battle. I think we're going to need God's help here. But where is the record in the Bible or any other religion that tells you that God helps cowards or lazy people?
Right.
David and Goliath, Gideon's army versus the horde, the American revolutionaries, a bunch of farmers and blacksmiths decided to take on the world's greatest military empire. And they had miracles that helped them to get through it. Why? Because they had faith and courage, not because they were cowards or lazy or let someone else do it. Every person who stands up counts. Every single person. Everyone who stands up and makes a stand is worthy in God's eyes. And if enough people stand up, we might get a few miracles that we need. I think that's what keeps me motivated.
Well, that is.
We're gonna end it on that note. Everyone should definitely come out if you can to Trevor Loudon's event that he will. It's not his event that he's being hosted. But let me just say again, it's
on screen. Exposing the Enemies Within, Saturday, February 21st, 2026, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the Best Western Gregory Hotel in the Pavilion Room, Brooklyn, New York. Trevor Loudon, and this is being put on by Justice in America and several other partners. Check it out. And I will say, I was talking to the organizer, they're not making money on this event. They just want to get people there. But it's so educational, and every time I talk to you, Trevor, you have new knowledge, you're always feeding the knowledge, and you're applying it to the here and now, and that's important. And you're one of the few academics that I talk to, and the few thinkers I talk to, that actually understands what actionable intelligence is. And you couldn't have said it better with your summation at the end of your advice for people. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
So with that, Trevor, thank you so much for taking the time on a Sunday to talk with me. And it's always a great conversation. I love that we can have a couple hours go by, not even realize it. So
I enjoy this stuff immensely, and you have such a great background. It's very easy to, it's very easy to dialogue with you. I'm not, so I appreciate that. I enjoy that. That's great.
I do too. Well, Trevor, we will see you next time. And by the way, we have to talk at some point about why Minnesota. You mentioned it before. And
I know so much about the history of Minnesota.
Oh, yeah. And then also a new discovery I made personally. We got ourselves a problem at the zoning boards at the local level. They've been infiltrated too.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't disbelieve you.
Yeah, I'll explain it to you.
Update me on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, what better way to weaken, people's resolve, but then to take their homes? Yep. Yeah. And this is out of the Salem, Massachusetts zoning board. I was shocked when I saw, but we'll get into that next time. Thank you so much, Trevor. I appreciate it. And where should people find you?
Yeah, trevorloudon.com. You can get my books, my DVDs, movies, etc. there. Just myname.com at the end of it.
Okay, well, thank you. And we'll get that all out to people. Thank you so much. Hopefully I'll be there at the event.
I'd love to see you in person, Brian. It'd be great.
Absolutely, and we'll have you over too as well to be our house guest.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that'd be fantastic.
We'd love it.
Enjoy that.
All right, well, thanks again, and Trevor, we will say goodbye, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Most welcome, and God bless everybody, and thanks to the audience for participating.
God bless you too. Thank you. Bye. Okay, well, that was a great conversation, and thank you guys for tuning in. Just go to the links. Get to work. We got a lot of work to do because the communists are not stopping, and Trevor knows that better than anyone. I'll talk to everyone soon. This has been Brian O'Shea with Investigate Everything. Thank you for tuning in.